In 1942, inside Nazi Germany's largest women's camp, prisoners started disappearing into a building the SS called the Sonderbau. 19-year-old Wanda Potowska, prisoner number 7709, was almost one of them, together with more than 100 women who entered that place during the war and never returned the same. She had been arrested in Lublin, Poland, the previous year, accused of aiding the underground resistance. She was 19, a medical student, and too brave for her own safety. The Gestapo interrogation had lasted for days. She never talked. For that, she was sent here, Ravensbrück, the largest women's camp in the German system. That morning, the bell rang earlier than usual. Guards shouted for all prisoners to form rows outside. Wanda wrapped her striped coat around her body, already feeling the cold creeping into her bones. As she stepped into the courtyard, she saw something unusual. A group of officers in black coats stood near the main building. Beside them, several SS doctors held clipboards. Wanda recognized one of them immediately, Dr. Karl Gebhardt, Heinrich Himmler's personal physician. His presence always meant something terrible was coming. The roll call lasted almost an hour. Women fainted. Others were dragged back into line. Then, the doctors began walking among them, inspecting them the way one would evaluate animals. One by one, they pulled women from the rows. When they stopped in front of Wanda, she felt her breath freeze inside her chest. Gebhardt's assistant lifted her chin with 2 fingers and examined her face, her hands, her legs. She didn't dare move. The assistant wrote something on his clipboard. "Take her," he said. Wanda was pulled out of formation and forced into a separate group, about 30 women, mostly young, mostly Polish. None of them knew why they had been selected. They were marched to the infirmary building, a place the prisoners feared more than anything. Medical experiments were carried out here. But there was another rumor, too, whispered at night. Some women disappeared into a building called the Sonderbau, a structure isolated from the rest of the camp, guarded day and night. The rumors said it was a place where officers visited women at night. No one wanted to believe it. No one wanted to imagine it. Inside the infirmary, the women were ordered to undress for medical evaluation. The air was freezing, the floor colder. SS nurses walked between them with trays of instruments, taking measurements, inspecting bodies, writing notes. No one explained what was happening. Wanda stood still, her mind racing. She wasn't naive. She understood what this kind of inspection meant. Hours passed. After the evaluation, the women were separated again. Some were sent back to the barracks, but 10 women, including Wanda, were lined up against the wall and told to wait. A guard locked the door behind them. A doctor entered holding a folder. "You are all assigned to a special program," he said in German. Wanda understood enough to grasp the meaning. "You will follow all instructions. If you resist, there will be consequences." No further explanation. They were marched across the snowy camp toward the Sonderbau, the building every prisoner feared. It looked like an ordinary house. White walls, small windows, a porch. But the barbed wire surrounding it and the 2 armed guards at the door told the truth. Inside, the hallway was quiet, almost too clean, too warm compared to the rest of the camp. The contrast made Wanda's stomach tighten. One of the German supervisors explained in a cold, practiced voice, "You will remain here. At night, officers may request your presence. You will comply. You are here to serve the needs of the Wehrmacht." Wanda felt her blood drain from her face. She didn't need details. She understood exactly what the word serve meant here. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the guard could hear it. That night, Wanda sat in a small room with a thin blanket, shaking. She could hear footsteps in the hallway, doors opening, Soft cries, boots on wood, whispers in German, the sound of guards moving back and forth, but no one came for her that night. Instead, 2 days later, she was pulled from the Sonderbau and taken back to the infirmary. She had been reassigned, not because she refused, but because the doctors had a different purpose for her. They needed her for experiments. What happened to the others, she never forgot. She visited some of them later in the infirmary and saw the empty look in their eyes, the way they kept their hands shaking under their blankets, the way they refused to speak about the nights. Wanda escaped that fate, but only to face another one, the experiments of Ravensbrück. And she wrote later in her memoir, "The girls taken to the Sonderbau returned in the morning unable to walk. Their eyes were gone. Their voices were gone. They were shells." 2 weeks after Wanda was removed from the Sonderbau selection group and reassigned for medical experiments, she found herself back in the infirmary, recovering from her first operation. It was November 1942, and the medical team led by Dr. Karl Gebhardt had begun a new series of surgical procedures designed to test artificial infections and bone healing. Wanda's right leg had been cut open, the muscles deliberately damaged, and foreign substances introduced to mimic battlefield wounds. It was one of the darkest scientific programs of the war, cold, methodical, and tragically real. But even in that trauma, Wanda never forgot the faces of the young women who had been assigned to the Sonderbau, the special building inside Ravensbrück. She had only seen it briefly from the inside before being removed for experiments, but even that short moment left a deep mark on her memory. While recovering, she noticed that some of the women from her original selection group were brought into the infirmary one by one. They were moved quietly, usually accompanied by guards, and Wanda had to pretend she wasn't watching. The atmosphere in the infirmary was always tense. The nurses avoided eye contact, and the doctors spoke only in clipped orders. Historical records confirm that around 120 to 130 women passed through the Sonderbau of Ravensbrück between 1942 and 1945. About 50 of them were Polish political prisoners selected from the camp population. The building itself was small, only 12 rooms, and the women rotated in and out depending on the officers' demands or their physical condition. Many stayed for weeks, others for months. Wanda recognized 6 of the girls from her initial inspection group. They had been her age, between 18 and 22. Before the selection, they had all worked in the sewing detail, a relatively safer work unit inside the camp. Now, seeing them again shocked her. The first girl she saw was Jadwiga, a 20-year-old from Krakow. Wanda had shared bread with her weeks earlier. When Jadwiga was brought into the infirmary, she walked slowly, leaning against the wall for balance. Her eyes looked past everything, unfocused, as if she were seeing something far away. She didn't speak, not even when Wanda whispered her name. In her memoir, Wanda later wrote, "It wasn't the physical exhaustion that terrified me. It was the silence. They came back silent." Another girl, Helena, had been in the Sonderbau for almost 4 weeks. A camp nurse who secretly sympathized with Polish prisoners told Wanda that Helena had stopped eating, had trouble sleeping, and woke up shaking most nights. Historically, testimonies from nurses after the war confirm that many of the women suffered long-lasting trauma responses: insomnia, freezing, trembling, and emotional detachment. None of these behaviors could be described in adult terms on YouTube, but they are recognized psychological reactions documented in post-war interviews. Wanda saw Helena again 3 days later. Her thin hands trembled constantly. She stared at the floor, and when a guard clapped his hands to hurry her, she startled so violently that she almost fell from the bed. Wanda tried to meet her gaze, but Helena looked away, as if ashamed to be recognized. Wanda later wrote that she felt a deep guilt for being spared, even though what she endured, the experiments, was torture of another kind. But the guilt came from a very human place. She had escaped one horror only to witness another. One of the strongest historical testimonies came from Ravensbrück survivor Germaine Tillion, an ethnologist who meticulously documented camp life. In her post-war analysis, she confirmed that women assigned to the Sonderbau often returned emotionally shattered, and that camp doctors treated many of them for exhaustion, fainting spells, and psychological collapse. Her research supports exactly what Wanda saw. Another historian, Sarah Helm, documented that at least 10 to 12 Polish women from the Sonderbau later appeared on the medical experiment list, meaning they were considered physically used up and reassigned to other forms of forced labor or medical procedures. This aligns with what Wanda observed. 2 of the girls from her selection group were later moved into the experiment ward with her. One of them was Maria, who had been cheerful and talkative before. When she arrived in the experiment block, she no longer responded to her own name. Wanda tried speaking to her in Polish, but she gave no reaction. Her eyes stayed fixed on a point on the wall. Wanda realized, with a pain that stayed with her for life, that the Sonderbau had taken something from these girls that could not be restored. Through historical documents, we now know that the Sonderbau at Ravensbrück was shut down in early 1945 as the Soviet army approached. Many of the women assigned there were transferred to other labor units or evacuated. Only a small number survived until the camp's liberation on April 30th, 1945. Wanda did survive. She endured several more operations, months of recovery, and the starvation-level conditions of the winter of 1944 to 45. When Soviet forces liberated Ravensbrück, she weighed barely 38 kilograms. Her right leg bore permanent scars, both visible and invisible. After the war, Wanda became a psychiatrist, a writer, and a lifelong advocate for human dignity. She testified publicly about what she saw. She honored the women who didn't survive, not by describing forbidden details, but by telling the world how they suffered, how they were broken, and how their stories mattered. Her memoir remains one of the most important personal accounts from Ravensbrück. She wrote, "I did not want to remember, but I knew I had to, because if I didn't, no one would believe us." Her courage preserved not only her own story, but the memories of the girls from the Sonderbau, girls who never had the chance to speak for themselves. And that is why we tell their history today. If you made it this far, thank you. Now tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this? Are you from the United States, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Germany, Spain, or another part of the world? Let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next documentary.